Hello and welcome to the channel. So you're about ready to start your first game, but you're not quite sure about a theme or a setting, a game system, or even your storyline. Well, today you're in luck, because at the channel today, we're going to discuss those things in a very polite, one might say gentlemanly, episode. No, that's not gonna work. I think we all agree that that intro was crap. Dawkins did it much better. That being said, yeah, give credit where it's due. And let's get into a little more of what we were talking about at the beginning of the video. We're actually going to address a lot of those things that we were discussing. Theme and how to select a setting and how to even select a system. Let's really get down to the basics here, though. For everybody out there who's run a game and done so successfully, this video is not for you. This is for people who, and yes, you, talking to you, who've never done it before and are just now starting to step into that role as a game master, as a storyteller, as a narrator, as a dungeon master, whatever your setting calls it. I prefer the term storyteller because that's what we do. We tell stories. I really like that White Wolf term for it, so that's what I'll use a lot going forward. So you've got your first assignment as a storyteller. You may have been picked by your friends because no one else wants to run a game, or maybe you just got an idea like, I just want to run something. I want to try it. Well, you know, you're in good company. A lot of my best friends have run games for a very long time, and we really enjoy each other's different styles. The first thing you got to think about is like, what kind of story do you want to tell? You know, do you want to tell an action story? Do you want to tell intrigue? Do you want to do politics? Do you want to do mystery or horror? Those things kind of really should be in the forefront of your mind when you're deciding to do a game. Or alternatively, you may have just found a system that you really, saw and you want to run it, like, Cyberpunk Red or Shadowrun 6th edition or the new V5 Vampire. Maybe one of those things caught your eye and you already have that idea of what your general feel is going to be. Those systems themselves kind of lend themselves in one way or another to specific types of gameplay. But if you're still kind of struggling, you haven't picked anything yet, you just got this bug like, I want to tell a story, or you got voluntold by your friends that you're going to be the next storyteller, there's some things to consider. If you've been playing with your friends for a while, or the group of people you're going to run for, you kind of know what they like to play, right? You observe around the tables. This person likes to do action scenes and likes to do a lot of in-your-face combat and punching. This person over here likes to do, talking with NPCs and investigating things. You can start to wrap those ideas into this type of stuff that not only you may want to run and enjoy running, but your friends are going to enjoy too. So breaking down that, it's really the first thing you should do, in my opinion, is figure out what kind of theme you want. Do you want to tell a horror game? Do you want to tell an action adventure game? Do you want to do investigations? Do you want to do mystery? These things are very important because that kind of gives you that's your main line through the story. Is this all action based and we're jumping from one encounter to another where people are coming after the characters, or the characters are trying to fight their way out of a complex or a dungeon? Those things set the tone for the types of characters that your friends are going to play and that you're going to have at your table. So that's the first thing you got to narrow down. Let's be honest here. A lot of those different types of games require different skills. So horror games require you knowing how to, manage tension around the table to make things more tense, more scary, but not to let it get overwhelming to where nobody's having fun. Action games, you want to keep things fast-paced at some spots, but you want to also give people time to slow down and have a breather between encounters. Investigations, you have to weave complicated plots, the red herrings and, false leads and maybe backstab and betrayals. There's a lot of fun you can involve into that, but and there's nothing saying that you can't put all of that together into a game. That's a little more advanced, a little more, I'd say, maybe intermediate level, than beginner. So once you have a theme, and for this case, let's go, oh God, I don't know. Let's go action adventure, right? You want to run an action adventure game. Now you start looking at what type of systems you want to run. Really look at the system. Things like Dungeons and Dragons are really set up for prolonged combat. As characters progress, they get more hardy. Well, they get more lucky, more able to shrug off blows. They get hit more often, but at higher levels, they get ways to avoid damage or mitigate it. So that's a very action-oriented, we hit each other all the time type game. You have players that want to show they can take blows and like a hero just keep on going. D&D might be a good spot. Shadowrun has a little more complex of a game setting. That's one of those games where everybody has the same amount of health, but how you can resist damage really kind of comes into play. So these types of things you have to look at. What does the game system you're looking at really have to offer for the type of setting that you want to run? You wouldn't necessarily want to run a massive combat game in like V5, for example, or maybe you do, because the combat can be very, very deadly. But that can also be part of the rush. So when you start selecting that system, you want to look at what it can offer the type of game that you want to run. If you're dealing with stuff that is going to have a lot of high magic or high fantasy elements, look at those game systems that have a good magic system that you feel makes sense to you. Because the big key there is when you pick a system, if it doesn't make sense to you around the table, it can slow things down. And, yeah, I'm sure your friends are going to give you a bit of a leeway because it's your first time running a game, and that's fine. Don't panic. Just make sure you feel comfortable. That's the big thing. So when you pick that system and you pick that theme, make sure you are comfortable with it. There's going to be challenges. There are going to be things that you have to really kind of either look up and check the book, or check online and see what other people did and what they thought about. But that's okay. Everybody starts somewhere, and as you start getting more comfortable, you learn a little more about how the game works and how the system works. You learn more about how different rules play against one another and how they work together to create the game that you're running. It makes you more comfortable, makes you more confident at the table, and that's really something that helps set players at ease and really kind of helps them not worry so much about, is the rule call right, but are we having fun? So once you have your theme and once you have your system, it's time to pick a setting. And that's, for me, is one of the most fun parts of running a game, is what setting do we want to run? What do we want to play with? Yeah, sure, we want to do action adventure for this game and we're going to use like D&D, but do we have to run it in a fantasy world? Not necessarily. There's the GM's guide talks about doing things in like, science fantasy futures or alternate realities. And some systems are made up to be very fluid with the type of game that you want to run. So creating a setting can really, really help bring all the elements that you're coming in, that are coming through your head into cohesion. So if you're running fantasy action adventure, you want to do something, that's going to be familiar to people, or people are, have enjoyed in the past, and you just want to take your turn in it. Like Forgotten Realms is right out there, or Dragonlance. Eberron, these types of settings are really, really known. They're very popular. People know them. And if you're comfortable with it, go wild. And that's a big common thread you're going to see here. It's getting comfortable with the tools that you're using to tell your story. That can be either, the types of themes you're working with. It could be the rule set you're working with. It could be the setting you're working with. Once you're comfortable with it, it shows. And it really helps people around the table, enjoy themselves more at your game. So those first steps can be a little hard, but there are resources out there for you. There are a lot of RPG forums. There's a lot of reviews about game settings and systems out there for you. And really, your first step should be, as a new storyteller, as a new game master or dungeon master, pick your theme, which you want to run with, and then find a setting or a system that works with that theme. You don't want to do hey, I wanted to do corporate espionage and cyberpunk. You wouldn't really use, D&D systems. You could if you homebrew it, and there's some things out there for you to do that, but that's, again, a little more advanced. So you want to pick a system that's going to really fit with the theme of what you want to run. And then the setting should complement that. Basically, think of it like you're painting a picture. You want all the colors to really work off one another. You want it to be vibrant. You want to have it make sense, and you want to be comfortable. And that really can help you go to the next step, which is writing your story. You have your main theme. We're running action adventure. We're going to pick, D&D as our system, and we're going to pick Forgotten Realms as our setting. So right there, we have the main components of our game. Now we just have to write the story. And the story can be really fun to write. You can work off of modules. You can take influence from movies you've seen. You can take influence from other games that you've played in, television shows that are out there for fantasy, or other sorts of, medium, especially a lot of really good books out there for fantasy. You can take a leaf from or an idea from and just kind of make it your own, make it original, and just have fun within the setting that you're playing. Now, story crafting is a very, very complicated piece, in my opinion. It can be easy to do, it can flow, but it also can be very, very hard, because if you're a type of storyteller that only plots a couple of sessions in advance, or maybe even just one at a time because you're not quite sure where your players are going, that can work great for you, but you'll have to keep a good record of where they've been, what they've done, or did they start a brawl with the town guard in Waterdeep? If so, you might want to make a note of that, because that can come back and create more story later on. What if they find the guard that they fought with is now an enemy when they come back. So when you start kind of pulling all these things together, you really want to start taking notes about where your players have gone and what they've done. Because if you ever have a point in the writing of your stories where you're like, I don't know what to do now, they beat the bigger bad guy and they got, you know, their reward, they're bringing it back to town. You know, how do I keep this going? How do we keep the adventure going? How do we keep it action oriented? Look at what they've done. Take those ideas from things they've done in the past as the group and use those to create little obstacles that they can surmount, or even just little brief challenges. Because the key there is, once you start making a believable world, like one that feels lived in, that the players feel like they made a difference, even if it is just one NPC coming back, like an old bartender from their first session when they just started out becoming adventurers, who gave them like a free drink. They come back and, you know, he was a nice guy to them. He gave them, you know, a discount on rooms for the night. They come back to town and, you know, he's been attacked, or his end's been burned to the ground, or, you know, maybe he passed away. That creates this sense of continuity. And when you deliver this, you know, knowing the ins and outs of your setting, and, you know, knowing the ins and outs of your system, and taking notes, you can start to see a narrative unfold that you may not have seen otherwise. So that's really a good place to start thinking about stuff, is really to look at your theme, your system, your setting, and then write your story. Don't feel that you need to write the whole story from start to finish. Because I'm telling you right now, as somebody's been doing this for a long time, and I've had this happen to me. I've not paid attention to this. I've tried writing stories, you know, from start to finish, and then the players' first game go completely off the track. They ignore an important NPC, or they aren't at a specific place in time to get a specific letter or to see something happen, and now we're trying to pick up the pieces of where the story was left and how to get them back on track. So don't worry about writing the whole thing. Make plot points. What are plot points? Plot points are basically those important points in a story where the player's decision, you know, make a huge difference, right? So, for example, a plot point might be when they make it to town, when they're going to retrieve, like, their quest from, let's say, a town, one of the Lords of Waterdeep, right? They're playing politics, and one of the Lords of Waterdeep has summoned them to his house, and they're at the mansion, and they have to decide if they're going to take the job, or if they don't trust him and they're not going to take the job. That's a major plot, you know, because then you can branch so many things off of that particular intersection. You know, if they don't take the job, what does the Lord do? You know, what will he do? Does he really need them, or was he going to use them as an excuse? And you can start writing all these different possibilities. And anything that you write or make a note of, you know, it doesn't be big. It could be bullet points, you know. The Lord wants them to do a retrieval of an artifact that got lost from, you know, a theft that he had at his mansion maybe a week ago. And if they don't get it back, then he's in danger of being found out for something bad under the table he's done with the other Lords of Waterdeep. You know, he could be in trouble politically. So if they won't get it back, he may want to try to stop them from talking to people. He may bribe them. Or maybe he has a wizard at court who's going to try to wipe their memories. They can create a rivalry right there. And if they do take the job, awesome. What if there's a spy in his court that was watching it and now knows the PCs are going to help this Lord find this artifact that's going to, you know, keep his secret? His rival doesn't want him to have him, you know, doesn't want him to get that artifact back, and is going to try and interrupt them. Now you're creating this idea of potential rivals. So you can make this in bullet points. Lord wants him to get a sword. He wants it because it could, you know, reveal a secret that he doesn't want revealed. If he doesn't get it back, this is going to happen. If he does get it back, here's what's going to help. If the players say yes, here are the people that aren't going to like them anymore. You know, you can start creating this little like tree, you know, or web, as you, if you will, of consequences of everything the players decide. And it doesn't have to be deadly at all. These can just be little encounters. Like maybe they hear somebody talking at a bar, like, yeah, you know, we know that Lord such and such has just hired somebody. I wouldn't feel sorry for that group. You know, you can create this little intrigue. Not every consequence you make has to be something horrible for the players. It could just be a conversation piece. It could be a little detail that they run into. And again, that makes them feel a little more like, you know, they're involved in the storyline. Those are just small little hints that really kind of help those things go together. So when you're writing down your story, just do the main lines. Sure, once you get to the section itself, you may want to do a little more work. You may want to, you know, name your NPCs. And hey, everybody, Future Ray here. I'm going to stop really quick. One thing I just mentioned about naming NPCs, I want to give us a little pro tip out there for free. players tend not to think that NPCs have names, that only major, important NPCs have names. If you give like the bartender, the waitress, or the random pet traveler on the street a name and they actually interact with them, even if it is just briefly, you might throw them for a loop that could buy you some time later on in the future. But then you might have them think that every NPC they meet is very important. So take naming seriously. I enjoy naming all my NPCs. It creates some fun situations. Anyways, we'll go back to Pastray in the rest of the video. You may want to, draw maps. Those are very, very useful. But all those steps have to be in order first. You have to know your theme. And you can start really using that theme as a guidepost for all your scenes. For action adventure, let's play up some of those tropes from adventure movies, right? And action movies. The players have a big battle, then they have recovery, a little bit of downtime, and they get more gear, or they have to meet with a contact to get a special thing to help them with the next part of the quest. You really use those ideas involved in your theme to really frame each encounter that you have with your PCs, each little scene they go to, or the little side steps and people they talk to. Using theme that way really helps shape everything and pull it all together, especially when that theme really fits well with your setting and the story you're trying to tell. The system, that is important too, because you want to make sure it supports what you're doing, right? So you want to make sure that a system for your game complements the story you're trying to tell. So clearly there's a lot of symbiosis here going on between the system, the setting, the theme, the story. All these things really work together well once you've gotten comfortable with them, because then you can improvise a bit more. You're not so stuck by the boundaries that you've set for yourself with the story that you made. You can play with things a bit. You can find new ways to get players back on track if they've gone astray in like episode 2 of your little adventure series, which happens a lot. Never forget that. It happens a lot. But get comfortable with it. Enjoy yourself. Because when you're enjoying yourself, if you feel relaxed, you feel comfortable, your players are going to enjoy yourself. But if you keep fun at the focal point of everything you're trying to do, it should be gold. As long as you get comfortable with the tools that you're using. And that's really the biggest part about being a story. Being comfortable with your tools, knowing when you can improvise, knowing when you get to try to rein players back in, how much leeway you can give them before you start to kind of, subtly guide them back to your story. That's stuff that comes in time and practice, and it's just a thing where you have to just get out there and try it. So don't be afraid. Your first session might be nerve-wracking. Especially if you're doing this and you're homebrewing everything, you're making your own, story, you're not using a module, and you're picking a setting, but you're making some changes to it, or maybe you made some house rules, on a system. It might be nerve-wracking, but you got it. Take a breath. Remember, you're here to have fun. Find stuff that works, and whatever doesn't, nobody says you have to use it. It's your game. Do what you and your players think is a good thing. And that's really the best thing I think I've ever been told, is to make sure you have a good time around the table every day. And it makes your games really memorable. People have a lot of fun, and they'll coming back. And don't feel that you're shoehorned into one particular type of setting, or one particular type of system. There are multiple systems out there for fantasy games, multiple settings out there for fantasy games. There might be one that aligns more with the story you want to tell. Pick that one. And if it's new to everybody around the table, hey, you guys are all in it together, learning it from the ground up. I've done that so many times, and some of them have been really, really good games. Some have been utter disasters. So don't worry about it. Just have a good time, and you'll do fine. Well, hope you enjoyed everything today. It may seem like there's a lot of stuff to consider when you're making your story, when you're getting ready to run your first game. Really, it just comes down to getting comfortable with everything you have at your disposal. Picking the tools that you feel comfortable with, that you think will be right for your story, or the theme you want to run with, the setting you want to run with. Those things, once you get used to, finding the right tools for you, it become much easier as you go forward. Just give it some practice, and be sure to have a lot of fun. Now, if you liked what we talked about today, feel free to hit the like button, and also subscribe, because we will be putting out more videos about certain things to help you around the table. The next episode, we're going to talk about some table issues. So things like getting players back on track, how to tell when a rule is just not working for you or your players, and how to really kind of get some cohesion and buy-in from your players around the table. That should be up roughly next week. We should be uploading around the same time. We look forward to having you back, so we'll see you in the next video. Everybody take care and have fun.